Today is June 6, 2016. Welcome to your special edition of your Daily Dose of MMA Now. This is a special edition. We have a special guest on, but let's get into the MMA news really quickly. UFC 199 was Saturday, and we learned Brock Lesnar would be coming back. Today was announced he'll face Mark Super Samoan Hunt at UFC 200. Also announced was Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor at UFC 202. And here's a quick recap of UFC 199. Michael Bisping received his title, knocking out Luke Rockhold in the first round of their middleweight championship bout. Dominic Cruz won a decision over Uriah Faber. Max Holloway won a decision over Ricardo Lamas. Dan Hendo Henderson knocked out Hector Lombard, and he said after the fight, this might be the last time you see him. Rounding out the main card, Dustin Poirier knocked out Bobby Green in the first round. And on the Fox preliminary card, Brian Ortega knocked out Clay Guida with 20 seconds left in a fight that he was down on. Beneil Dariush defeated James Vick via knockout. Jessica Andrade TKO Jessica Penne. And rounding out that card, Alex Caceres defeated Cole Miller in a unanimous decision. We blew through those news because there was two big things happened. Muhammad Ali passed, which we addressed on Friday night, and also a media banning that happened for one of MMA Fighting's journalists. And joining us right now is Matt Perrault from Yahoo Sports. Matt Perrault, how you doing?
David, how are you? Good to see you.
Pretty good. We never blow through the news like that quickly, but I wanted to get you on. I saw on Twitter, I wanted to get your feedback on this UFC lifetime ban. You said you're not a journalist. You called yourself a media member. I feel like you're a journalist. What do you see yourself as, and what's the difference between that and what MMA Fighting journalist did and getting himself banned?
So we're talking about Aaron Alani, who received a lifetime ban from the UFC following him breaking two stories while he was in the media room for UFC 199. Now Ariel's had his run-ins with Dana White and Zuffa, for years now in terms of his breaking of stories, and they feel like he does not take the UFC's best interest at heart, and sometimes they feel like the UFC has a right to ask of that of journalists. Look, for myself, I'm not a journalist because I'm a sports talk show host, and I think if a sports talk show host tells you they're a journalist, they're not really holding true to the craft itself. You can be a journalist and a sports talk show host. You can do both, but it's very difficult because what we're asked as sports talk show hosts is to do things sometimes it's in the best interest of our radio stations, and it wouldn't necessarily be in the best interest of, say, the public if you were a journalism or a sports fan base, if you had information. And that's kind of what Ariel has been talking about, that when he gets news, he breaks it. Well, I've had news in my career, and I haven't broken it. And I've been honest about that because that's not really my role. I'm an entertainer. Sports talk has become much more about the personality and a lot less about, nuts and bolts and breaking news stories. And we discuss news stories, but it's why writers appear on my show every night. It's why we have other journalists who are on the show every night who cover teams on a daily basis. It's not what I do. I'm not in locker rooms every day. I'm not talking to coaches per se every single day about stories, and I don't work sources. So I have them, and I've broken stories before, but that's not primarily my job and what I do as a sports talk show host. So that's what I meant in that reference. Ariel's been honest that he is a journalist. His job is to be a journalist. He does host an online show that leads him to be somewhat of a personality, but for the most part, his job is to break news. And when he has news, he breaks it. The latest got him a lifetime ban from the UFC, which frankly is preposterous, and just I don't understand why the UFC feels like they have the opportunity to dictate when a story comes out and when a story does not come out. And the only reason why they can do so is because they're a private organization that right now the media has not banded together to form a union, where if this is the NFL, the football writers would be having a revolt right now, and you would have a massive, massive problem. The MMA world does not have it yet. They will, but they don't have it yet. So when an organization decides to throw out one of their key members, that there's some recourse, there's some backlash besides the public and Twitter and Facebook and whatnot. There's actually something that can be done from a media perspective to make sure this doesn't happen or isn't going to happen to anyone ever again.
Now, do you agree? What are your first thoughts? I mean, it came out today too that Fox didn't directly pay him, that the UFC paid a couple of his paychecks. What's your thoughts on that?
It's not good. I mean, that's a very gray area, and it's something that, again, going back to why I don't call myself a journalist, because I get paid, and I said it on Twitter, I get paid from a variety of different people. I get paychecks from all sorts of different angles. And if I were to come out and say, I'm a journalist and I have these ethical standards, and not to say I'm unethical, but I take money from people who pay me to do events and to endorse products, and I do things that most personalities in the media do. It does impact my ability to be objective in some ways in terms of when do I talk about something or how I talk about something. That's just the fact of today's media world. You have to be careful, and you have to ask, sometimes, and Ariel talked about this, sometimes you ask your people, hey, by the way, if I ask you this, or if I'm going to talk about this, what happens? Because there's a business side of everything that I say every night. So and Ariel kind of is walking a very difficult tightrope there, and you can be an objective journalist, but then things or a total, I'm above reproach, but you can get yourself into trouble and you can get yourself banned like the UFC did, because that's their right. I mean, and Ariel said it today, a credential is not a right. It's the UFC can take away those credentials as much as they want, but it's why they took away the credential is the problem. Not that they pulled it, but they pulled it because he broke a story that they wanted control over and they wanted their big bang, and Ariel got it first. And look, he confirmed it from multiple sources. The UFC may or may not have someone inside their organization talking to Ariel, and that's a UFC problem. That's not an Ariel Helwani problem.
Does the lifetime ban get reversed?
I hope so. I mean, I hope cooler heads prevail, and I hope that everyone gets together and the Petita brothers and Dana White kind of sit down and say, okay, was that the best thing for us to do? Because they totally swallowed up Michael Bisping's knockout. It totally swallowed up the fact that Dominic Cruz won his fight, and then it totally overshadowed the fact that Brock Lesnar's coming back and that Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor are fighting at 202. So the story today in the UFC is not what's happened in the octagon or what could happen in the octagon. It's what they decided to do to a media member. So I hope that they recognize that they made a really grave error there, and they really, shot themselves in the foot by making a pretty quick and rash decision. And I know they'll tell you, oh, it wasn't quick, it wasn't rash, but that was emotion. That was just being very angry and deciding that this guy's in front of us. And normally when a guy breaks a story, he's not actually in front of you. And that's what happened at 199, and thus that's what led to the ban.
All right, we got 2 minutes left. Let me try to get some quick hitters off on you. Does this set a precedent for the UFC, for other organizations doing this as well?
No, because this is something that, this is where social media comes in. The backlash today has been tremendous. And really, the UFC is a very unique animal here because of the fact that they are still they're very successful, but they're still very young in terms of their overall impact on the sports world. So the NHL, the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, they would love to try this. They know better. They know they would never do it. It causes more damage than good when you do something like this, and it makes you come off look it's really thin skinned, and it makes you come off as just an organization that is not going to handle itself very well when things really do get tough. Because like Ariel said today, there are things he could be talking about that he chose not to, like the sale for the UFC. You go into that whole story, and he hasn't. So the whole idea of him being negative, even if he was negative, who cares? He's a media member. Right. He can be whatever he wants.
Real quick, could this be one of those stories where any press is good press? For the UFC, they let go Burt Watson, the very famous cut man.
No, to answer the question, no, this is not one of those cases where any press is good press. This is the most popular MMA journalist that there is, and you've just gone ahead and taken that guy out. They've elevated Ariel Helwani to a much larger level. So instead of hurting Ariel, they've actually helped Ariel. So this is good for Ariel Helwani. This is not good for the UFC. And the quicker this story goes away, the better for them.
Right. It's just amazing how much press has got ESPN, Fox, Deadspin. Are you going to be addressing this on your show tonight?
Yeah, and I'm talking with Ariel, actually going back and forth. I'm trying to beg him to do one more interview today. He's done about 800 today, so I want to see if I can get him on the show today. And if not tonight, we'll get him on the show tomorrow, hopefully, to continue talking about this situation. Because on his show, he did open up some interesting doors, some interesting things that you mentioned about the payment that he received from the UFC, and some of the other things that he kind of went into that opened my eyes a little bit as to, okay, there's more to the story than just what we're hearing from 199.
That's Matt Perrault from Yahoo Sports. Matt, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
That'll do it for today, and we'll see you again tomorrow for your special edition of Daily Dose of MMA Now.